Okay, thanks for coming. We are going to have our own Super Bowl here with learning some Torah with Rabbi Kaplan. And let me just start by sharing my screen. As usual, I just want to acquaint everybody with the website. The link to this website's in all your emails and all the texts. It is a great resource, and I keep adding to it with the class notes from all the months. We have the recorded classes here. So as of 12 noon on a Monday, the prior night's video is loaded onto this YouTube channel.
I'm back.
Hello, Sue Ellen.
Closing the door. I'm closing the door so I can hear.
Okay.
I'm on Steve. Yeah, sounds good.
And what I would like everybody to do is, and we have what the current week's class is. We have the blog, which has different articles on it. So I'm asking everybody, if you think of somebody who might be interested in checking out the class, feel free to pass on the link. And you might be doing them a great favor because these classes are chock full of great teachings because we are passing on the teachings of great teachers. So on that note, let us start with today's teachings. Okay, the agenda for today is continuing our study of the Amidah, the standing prayer as meditation, as described by Rabbi Kaplan, picking up in the first blessing of the Amidah, and towards the end of it with the phrase that God remembers the love of the patriarchs and brings a redeemer to their children's children. And then we're going to finish up in this class with a discussion on how to deal with problems when you're actually meditating. We have an expert guide for that, and we'll start with talking about legs going to sleep, and there's a whole litany of problems people come across when they meditate. We're going to try to give you some good ways to resolve those. We're also going to start addressing a key question from one of our students, which is as follows. Which rabbi was saying that Hashem repurchases the world? I understand it's the same as Hashem recreating the world every second, right? And I am curious why purchasing or repurchasing, what is that phrasing all about? How do you understand it? Who do you repurchases from whom? That's a very good it's a very good question, and obviously it's looking at the translation of koneh as purchasing, and it's reflecting how we commonly think about purchasing, which when it comes to God is slightly different. So we're going to start that discussion tonight, and I'm going to develop a bunch of materials so that we can get into it in depth. I think that there's a lot of people that address this, and it's a great question because it really asks, what is God doing right now, right here, with these computers, with the, how is God related to us using Zoom, using books, using text pages? How does God relate to that? So imagine if you could have that understanding of God when you're using your computer, when you're reading from a book. So we're going to try to dive into that. And I've already started collecting some material. So stay tuned for that. And as always, we're going to finish up with the meditation so people can keep in practice. Practice makes permanent. And the more you do meditation, the more you'll love it. And you'll see what a benefit it is to your life. Okay, so picking up where we left off last week, the Amidah's meditation, remembering God remembers the love of the patriarchs and brings a redeemer to their children's children. That is from Jewish Meditation, which is our chief guide here. Let's see what he says. This is what he says. With this phrase, the Amidah, the standing prayer, links the past to the future, saying that God, in quotes, remembers the love of the patriarchs and brings a redeemer to their children's children. God thus shares our memory of the past. God shares our memory of the past, especially with regards to the patriarchs, who were the first ones to bring God consciousness to the world. Remember that phrase, God sharing our memory. We're going to focus on that. And why the patriarchs? It's because, as he understands it, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they brought what Rabbi Kaplan's calling God consciousness into the world. Just as we look to the patriarchs for a paradigm of the God experience, God looks at their love for him as a paradigm and as a reason to remain close to their descendants no matter what happens. So Rabbi Kaplan is saying that we have a certain amount of credit with him because we are descendants of the people who brought God consciousness into the world. In other words, our credit is good with God because of our ancestors, showing the greatness of those people, showing the connectedness that we have to them, and showing that God deals with us as a nation. And by the way, it's not just the Jewish people, dealing with all people as a unified whole, which we'll explore at some point. We also see God as our hope in the future. No small thing in this age over which hangs a Damocles sword of nuclear destruction and all the crazy things that are going on with communism. We believe that God will bring a redeemer who will make the world a safe and sane place to live. We have faith that there will come a time when all humanity, not just Jewish people, will be brought back to the God consciousness that the patriarchs enjoyed, and that this will be a time of universal peace and good for all humankind. This is our ultimate hope in the future. So in Rabbi Kaplan's understanding of what the Messiah is and what the world to come is, it is based on a certain consciousness first and foremost, a certain mindset, a certain shared mindset that people have. That is the essence of it. And if we have that mindset, then comes the good things, the lion sleeping with the lamb, laying down with the lamb, and all the things that are forecast by the prophets when the world is righted. Okay. We conclude by saying that God remembers the patriarchs and will bring a redeemer for his namesake, which we're also going to get into. As we discussed earlier, God's name is much more than an arbitrary collection of sounds. Rather, it is a word that speaks of his essence and his relationship with creation. The name is an important focus of our God consciousness, as I have discussed in previous chapters. We'll be getting into that in particular when we talk about the types of meditation that Rabbi Kaplan introduces to us. The name of God is integral to a few of them. And you'll see the power that it has, and you'll see the care with which people need to address using those words. Handle with care. God's name also figures in the lives of the patriarchs and in our hope in the future. The experience of the patriarchs was always closely linked to God's name. The Torah tells that Abraham began his career by, in quotes, calling in the name of God. The patriarchs were thus the ones who initiated God consciousness to the world through his name. Not only did they link themselves to the infinite, but they also identified it with a name. So again, these are metaphysical ideas related to the power of words and in particular names, in particular name of God, which need further discussion. But the point is that the patriarchs related to people and communicated people in the name of God, with the name of God, as they try to raise the consciousness of people. So you could see that the patriarchs were engaging in a form of joint meditation with people through the use of God's name. That's a very powerful thing. And it's hard to understand, but it shows the level of spiritual development of the patriarchs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it shows the potency of meditation, that actually it was used to raise consciousness, and that it was used by a group. It was used by several people at the same time, collectively. Complicated stuff, but it shows the power of the meditation and the prevalence of meditation in our spiritual tradition. The process begun by the patriarchs will be completed by the promised Redeemer, the Mashiach, who will bring God's name to all humanity. One of the important prophecies regarding the messianic future is, on that day, from Zechariah, on that day, God will be one, his name will be one. We sing that. Not only will the entire world worship God, but everyone will call him by the same name. This will indicate that the whole world will have the same God consciousness as the heirs of the patriarchs. The Amidah expresses this by stating that the entire process will be for his name's sake. Powerful stuff, and we're going to be going through this bit by bit by bit, because Rabbi Kaplan is presenting very powerful, very complicated, very sophisticated ideas, linking them together because they have been linked together in the Amidah. So you could see the wisdom and high level of spiritual growth that the sages had acquired when they composed the Amidah. And also importantly, you can see that the thrust of this prayer is a forecast of what the world will be like with all people, Jews and non-Jews together. So our idea of what the future will bring, the goodness of the future, is for the entire planet, not just Jewish people. The initial portion ends with the expression with love, be'ahava. It is love that bridges the gap between the past and future, even as love bridges the gap between man and woman. In a sense, the past and future can be looked upon as a male and a female. Just as the male impregnates the female, the past impregnates the future. The redemption in the future will come from the memory of the patriarchs in the past. It is God's love spanning the chasm of time. Okay, 2 points there. First of all, we're going to talk about what he understands love to be. He writes extensively on that. That'll be one of the kernels which we take a deep dive into. But also, look at his symmetry between male and female and past and present. Just as the male impregnates the female, the past impregnates the future. Now, why is that interesting? In Hebrew, the root zayin chet resh is used to form the word both male and to remember. Zachar, male, impregnates a woman so that the future there's a future generation. Zecher, to remember, as he's describing it here, memories, the past impregnates the future in terms of time. So we take from the past and we bring it forth into the future. Man takes his biology, brings it into a woman, and then you have the human future. So that explains one interesting aspect of Hebrew as to why the words male and remembering have the same root. It's interesting. Okay. And to wrap up, moreover, God causes the process of history to unfold, the goal being the perfection of humanity and society. This entire process is governed by love. We make ourselves aware of God's love at this point in the Amidah and are totally saturated by it. Okay, so as we've said many times, You have to walk into this prayer service with that mindset. It's very hard to just pick up a prayer book after rushing in from shopping or working and saying, all right, I am going to be totally saturated by God's love. It takes preparation. It takes preparation to not just understand the prayers and make them meaningful to you, but it takes preparation in terms of having the proper frame of mind when you pray. So there's a meditation involved in understanding the prayers. There's a meditation involved in executing the prayer. So you could see the importance of mental state and what's in your mind to make the prayer experience meaningful as he's describing it. Okay. But there's a lot here. So what we're going to do is start tackling it bit by bit and try to make it meaningful. And we're going to start with his mentioning that God shares our memory of the past. What does that mean? As you can imagine, Rabbi Kaplan writes about it, and he writes about it in an essay called Meet the Real You, which is published in a book called Encounters, which I just happen to have right here. Oh, it is upstairs. Stay right there. Sorry about that. Okay. Encounters. What are we talking about here as far as God sharing our memories? This is what he says. This is crazy stuff, but it's important. Okay. What are you really? Who is the real you? Before we examine these deep and abstract questions, let's look at the concrete and evident aspects of a person. Take your hand, for example. Look at it. Think about it. What do you see? It's part of your body, a limb, an appendage, made of bone and sinew and covered with flesh and skin. It is filled with nerves and blood vessels. There are lymph ducts running through it, connecting it to your body, making it a part of you. But what are you? What happens when you tell your hand to open and close? How does your mind will your hand to open? Who is telling your hand to close? Now let's consider the whole person. Point to yourself. If you are like most people, you will point your finger at your chest, at your heart, at your body. But is your body really you? Not long ago, a person could consider his body an integral part of himself. You were your body and your body was you. But this is no longer the case. Scientific progress has changed the entire concept of human identity. This new era was born in the late 1960s when a hopeful and awestruck world witnessed one man's dramatic struggle for life. Dr. Philip Blayberg lived for a year and a half with someone else's heart beating in his breast. If I had asked Dr. Blayberg to point to himself, would he have pointed to his chest? Was this heart transplanted from another human being really part of him? We know somebody in Fairlawn has a new heart. Actually, I know two people. Dr. Blayberg once described his emotions when he saw his own, that is, his original heart suspended in a jar of formaldehyde. How does a man feel holding his own heart in his hands? Which heart was really Dr. Blayberg's? Now ask yourself, is the heart that beats inside you, the one you pointed at, is this the real you, or are you something else entirely? In 1969, the idea of transplanting a human heart alive and beating into another person seemed like a miracle. Today, it is almost commonplace. Like I said, I know two people. I can call them up right now. Today, the advances of science are even more radical. Researchers predict things that will force us to change our way of thinking completely. One of the things that researchers are predicting, perhaps within the next decade or so, and this was written 1990, is a brain transplant. A living brain could be taken from one human body and placed in another. Such a feat would force us to face this question: just what is the human personality? Imagine that you have an incurable disease in your body, but that your brain remains healthy. The doctors find a donor for you, a person who has irreparable brain damage, whose brain has ceased to function, but whose body is healthy. You are placed under anesthesia. Your brain is removed from your present body, the body too sick to sustain life, and is placed in this new healthy body. Now imagine that you wake up. You still have your old brain with all your memories. Your complete personality has remained intact with all your old behavior patterns. Your original thinking patterns are still functioning, but you have a brand new body, new hands, new feet, new eyes, new ears, and a new heart. Your original body was old and sick, wasting away, but now you have a young, new body, healthy and full of energy. Who wouldn't want that? Now, if I asked you to point to yourself, would you point to your chest, to your body? Remember, you have your old brain, your old thoughts, your old memories, but a new body. Who is the real you? Is that old body lying lifeless on a slab? Or is it this new one, the body that you can now control with your thoughts? Is this your body at all? Perhaps the real you is your brain. As our knowledge progresses, the questions become more and more complex, and we must search further still. We live in the age of computers. The technological advances are too rapid for the layman to follow. Each generation of computers is more sophisticated than the previous one. The supercomputers outperform their predecessors many thousands of times over. Each generation is more complex, faster, and literally more intelligent. Much of the advanced computer technology is developed through the science of cybernetics. This science draws comparisons between advanced computers and the human brain. In many ways, extremely complex computers behave much like the human brain, and to a large extent, the human brain behaves like an extremely complex computer. Through cybernetics, computer engineers use our knowledge of the human brain to design better computers, and psychologists are able to use our knowledge of computers to gain greater insights into the workings of the human brain. In computer technology, it is possible to program a memory transfer. That is, all the information in one computer can be transferred to another. This takes place electronically. All that passes from one computer to the other is information, data carried by electrical impulse. Cyberneticists have speculated whether it would be possible to do the same with the human brain. This concept is a favorite theme of science fiction writers, but many serious scientists think that it would be possible. And even if it is not possible in practice, it is possible in theory. Let us try to envision a human memory transfer. A person has an incurable disease. Neither his body nor his brain can be salvaged. We grow a new human body, brain and all, a genetic clone of the original. This guy talking about this in 1990. And some kind of chemical nutrient solution. This is not possible now, but advances in bioengineering suggest that it might be possible in a decade or two. So a new body is grown, a new body with a blank brain. The new brain is capable of functioning, but it lacks memories and thought patterns. It has never been used at all. We now take the final step. We perform a memory transfer from the sick person to the new brain lodged in the new body. Now we must deal with a fascinating concept. If all of a person's memories, thought patterns, and personality traits could be transferred to a new body and brain, that person would literally exist in the new body, in the new brain, even though nothing physical has changed, even though no physical part of him has been transplanted to the new body. All that has been transferred, all that has been placed in the new body is a certain amount of data, information that up until now existed in the old brain. This information contains the sum total of this person's personality. All this is possible, at least in theory. Now I ask again, who is the real you? It can't be your body, not even your brain. It can only be the information contained in your brain. your memories, your personality, and your thought patterns. What then happens when no brain transplant or memory transfer takes place? When a person's original body deteriorates and dies? What happens to all this information? After the brain becomes inert and the body decays, what happens to the data bank that seems, in our deeper analysis, to be the real person? When a book is burned, its contents are destroyed. When a computer is smashed or even unplugged, its information is permanently erased. Well, when a person dies, does the same thing happen? Is the mind, the personality, the thought patterns, and memories irretrievably lost? Here's where he brings in God. We know that God is omniscient. He knows everything and remembers everything. Every thought, every memory, every personality trait of every human being. He is aware of every single thing that exists within our minds. So when a person dies, does God forget it all? Certainly not. Even after a person's death, all this information remains and continues to exist in God's memory. We may think of something that exists in memory alone as being static, fixed pieces of data, lifeless facts. But God's thoughts and memories are not static. The sum total of a human personality may indeed exist in God's memory, but this is not the same as existing in human memory. In God's memory, the human personality can still maintain its identity. It can still maintain its volition, and it can remain active. This is what we call the human soul. This is what lives on even after a person dies. It took me a very long time to understand any of this, but the best image I have of this is like a backup of your disk in the cloud. That's the best metaphor that I can think of for what he's talking about. In other words, we're doing backups. We're doing backups of the information that's in our mind, and the backup is in God's mind. And he has like a space for me and a space for you and a space for you and a space for you. So when we die, even though the contents of what we have would die with us, there's a backup, and God has it. And that's what he is saying is our soul. It is very difficult for us to imagine an active personality, a living entity existing within God's memory. The entire concept of God's mind is most difficult to understand, so we give it names that we can grasp. We say that a soul is in heaven or in paradise. We describe the soul as dwelling in the world to come, in the world of souls. We say that it rests in the bond of eternal life. Okay. This is really heavy stuff, but why did we bring it up? We brought it up because in the Amidah, it says, Zocher Chastei Avot, and remembers the kindness of the patriarchs. Umevi Goel Livnei B'neihem, and he brings the Redeemer. And when we say remembers the kindness of the patriarchs, Kaplan says God thus shares our memory of the past. So what's happening is that what he's saying is that Abraham does something great, and the people around Abraham, let's say his wife, his sons, they remember what he did, and God, and that backup of that memory is in God's iCloud, and on and on and on. And the good deeds of these patriarchs who had attained this level is remembered by people, and the backup is in God's memory. And God is calling upon those memories of those people when we daven and saying, oh yeah, you guys, I remember you guys are descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah, I got them. I know those guys. I remember what they did because I got a backup of you guys remembering what they did. and you guys being there when they did it and creating a memory of that. Very sophisticated metaphysical stuff, but as best as I can understand, that's what he's talking about. So you could see how philosophic are the concepts that go into the Amidah, and you can see the high level of understanding that Rabbi Kaplan had of these concepts. And you can see that if we can get our brains around these concepts to some extent, how mind expanding it would be, and how deeply spiritual would be the experience of davening the Amidah. Any questions? Okay. We're going to continue this and bit by bit go over these highfalutin concepts in the Amidah and see what kind of we can get out of them. But for tonight, we're going to move on to the question of the rabbi who was talking about Hashem repurchasing the world. So that was the Malbim. Meir Leibish ben Michael Visser, the Malbim, Malbim, Malbim. That's how they come up with the acronyms, the Malbim. One of my favorite wordsmiths. Okay, this is what he said. God is the possessor of heaven and earth. They are his purchase exclusively. Just as whatever is purchased is in the possession of the purchaser and under no one else's control, likewise, God controls both the upper pattern of the constellations and the nether pattern of the earth. And not only did God purchase heaven and earth in the past, at the time of creation, I know what you're thinking, purchase from whom? But he keeps on purchasing continually, and that he continues to renew the works of creation, imposing constraints and wondrous supervision every moment. So I'm just answering the question. It was the Malbim that said this. He's talking about purchasing in the sense of owning. Kone can mean owning. Renewing it, the works of creation continually. That also is going to require a deep dive, bit by bit. But at the end of the day, hopefully we'll get like this sense of wonder. It's like, wow, God's doing that right now during this class. That's what we're going to shoot for. And I'm reasonably sure that there's a bunch of resources to cover this, which we will use. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about meditation with Bante Gunaratana, our resident expert on meditation, discussing the various problems related to meditation, starting with legs going to sleep. It is very common for beginners to have their legs fall asleep or go numb during meditation. They are simply not accustomed to the cross-legged posture. Some people get very anxious about this. They feel they must get up and move around. A few are completely convinced that they will get gangrene from lack of circulation. Numbness in the leg is nothing to worry about. It is caused by nerve pinch, not by lack of circulation. That's important to understand. You can't damage the tissues of your legs by sitting. So relax. When your legs fall asleep in meditation, just mindfully observe the phenomenon. Examine what it feels like. It may be sort of uncomfortable, but it is not painful unless you tense up. Just stay calm and watch it. It does not matter if your legs go numb, and stay that way for the whole period. After you have meditated for some time, that numbness will gradually disappear. Your body simply adjusts to daily practice. Then you can sit for very long sessions with no numbness whatsoever. Okay, a few things here. First of all, as we've discussed, you don't necessarily have to sit in the yogi posture or the Indian posture. You can sit in the chair. I almost always sit in a chair. Proper posture, back straight, the whole bit. Okay. And you can have a very successful, very deep meditation for a very long period of time that way, as long as you have the proper structure. However, some people do like to use this bent, cross-legged posture, and there's advantage to that. The advantage to that is that your body forms a very balanced kind of triangle, and it's a nice structure to be in. It. You support yourself. There's good energy flow. It's a nice position to be in, but you have to have the hips and the knees for it. I don't. Okay. Second point. He always stresses the mental component to problems. So he says here, people get very anxious about the numbness. Already people are making a mountain out of a molehill. Oh no, I'm numb. Okay. And so he's talking about, you got to chill. You got to calm yourself and not make such a big deal out of it. Embrace it. They feel that they come up with some kind of false understanding. You have to know the body to some extent before you come to false conclusions about what's happening. And as he says, it's a pinch. It's not a lack of circulation. Okay. However, I will just add that if you have a very poor structure, you very well could be cutting off your circulation because you're leaning too much on this or that. So you got to be mindful of that. But it takes a lot to cut off circulation. And if you're following the idea of proper structure, you'll avoid that problem. So you relax. And if you fall asleep, if you have any other odd sensation, that becomes your focal point, and watch it. Don't let it bother you. And make that the topic of your meditation, and you'll find yourself relaxing, and the whole suffering part of it will be minimized. If you take the nervous, anxiety, compulsive, whatever idea, reaction out of the equation, it becomes not such a big deal. Okay. Quite obviously, if you've done something really dumb or something, like sat on a cushion with pins in it, or whatever, then you make the adjustment and you start over again. Okay. But once you're settled in the right setting and you still have a problem, then you can just mindfully work through it. That's his point. Okay. I'll cover one other problem before we meditate. This problem is called odd sensations. People experience all manner of varied phenomena in meditation. Some people get itches, others feel tingling, deep relaxation, a feeling of lightness, or a floating sensation. You may feel yourself growing or shrinking or rising up in the air. Beginners often get quite excited over such sensations. Don't worry, you are not likely to levitate anytime soon. As relaxation sets in, the nervous system simply begins to pass sensory signals more efficiently. Large amounts of previously blocked sensory data can pour through, giving rise to all kinds of unique sensations. It does not signify anything in particular, it is just sensation. So simply employ the normal technique. Watch it come up and watch it pass away. Don't get involved. Now, I think this lesson points to the importance of what you do before you meditate. If you just go through a hectic day, whatever it is, you run into the house, you sit down, you meditate, you're going to be importing all kinds of disturbedness into the meditation. If your body's even if you're sitting straight and you think you're relaxed, you haven't given your mind a time to adjust to the new activity, and you're bringing in all the other stuff, and it could be excitement, whatever. And yeah, these kinds of things can happen. My training in meditation has been virtually almost always to do it after a period of physical activity when your body is ready to settle. And if your body is ready to settle, then your mind's ready to settle. And I typically don't go through all this stuff. So that stresses the importance of preparation and even light activity, whatever you have to do with your body to get rid of the kinks and all the agitation and just relax. And then your mind will relax, and it'll be much easier to achieve a deeper meditative state. because you won't have all this other stuff interfering. Okay. So, any questions or comments? Okay. We're going to stop the recording.